The stepmother was enjoying a quiet afternoon in her small, sunlit kitchen, the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional chirp of birds outside providing a gentle soundtrack to her thoughts, when an unexpected sound from the driveway made her pause, a strange, uneven knocking echoing through the quiet street, and curiosity nudged her toward the window where she saw Daniel, her stepson's friend, crouched by the old car she hadn't driven in weeks, twisting bolts, checking wires, and muttering softly to himself as if trying to coax the stubborn engine back to life. And she was immediately struck by the concentration on his face, the way his fingers worked with skill and care, the hint of frustration mixed with determination, and a small, unexpected thrill ran through her chest because despite knowing him only casually, she had always admired his thoughtfulness and kindness from afar, and she found herself stepping outside before she could stop herself, calling softly, "Do you need any help?" And he looked up, wiping grease from his hands, a sheepish smile tugging at his lips, eyes meeting hers briefly in a way that made her stomach flutter, and she noticed the way he seemed slightly nervous under her gaze. Yet there was warmth in it, an openness that made her feel seen, appreciated, and strangely alive in a way she hadn't felt in a long time, and without thinking, she offered him a glass of water from the kitchen, their hands brushing for just a second as he took it, a spark of electricity passing through her that made her heart beat faster, and she quickly realized that the ordinary afternoon had taken an unexpected turn into something charged with subtle, unspoken energy, and as she handed him the glass, he muttered a quiet "thank you" that sounded softer than usual, almost hesitant, and she smiled, trying to steady the strange fluttering inside her, wondering why such a simple interaction made her feel so aware, so alive, and she found herself studying the way he moved, the way he leaned slightly over the engine, how focused he was, how the sunlight hit his hair and cast a warm glow across his features, and she realized with a jolt that her feelings for him, though gentle and new, were more complicated than she had expected. An odd mixture of admiration, curiosity, and a quiet longing she wasn't sure she fully understood, and before she could dwell on it further, the car made a sudden click, a sharp mechanical sound, and then roared to life with a smooth hum, startling both of them, and Daniel froze, his hands suspended midair as he looked at her, eyes wide with surprise and a flicker of embarrassment, and for a brief moment, they simply stared at each other, the sound of the engine fading into the background as their silent connection deepened, the air around them charged with a strange, tender tension that neither dared to break, and she felt a rush of warmth and nervous excitement all at once, a realization that something small, almost mundane, had transformed into a moment that felt significant, meaningful, and quietly intimate, and she found herself wondering if he felt it too, this subtle, unspoken bond forming between them as he adjusted the engine one final time, the car now running perfectly, as if it had been waiting for his careful touch to awaken it, and she could not deny the pull she felt toward him, a mix of respect, admiration, and a soft, fluttering curiosity that made her cheeks warm and her heart skip beats in a way that was both thrilling and gentle. And yet, before she could speak or act on her feelings, Daniel muttered, almost nervously, I should probably go. Your stepson might be expecting me." And she felt a pang of disappointment mixed with a strange relief, knowing that he had to leave, that this fleeting, perfect moment was over, yet also grateful that it had happened at all, grateful for the small window of connection that had opened between them. And as he packed up his tools with careful, deliberate movements, his gaze occasionally flicking toward her, mixture of hesitation, warmth, and unspoken words in his eyes, she felt a quiet ache in her chest, a longing for more time, more conversation, more moments like this, and she noticed the subtle ways he lingered for just a second longer than necessary. The small gestures that seemed to say he didn't want to leave quite yet, that he enjoyed being near her more than he might admit, and she realized that the ordinary tasks of fixing a car had unexpectedly become a vessel for connection, for emotion, for subtle affection that didn't need to be stated aloud to be felt deeply. And as he finally slung the toolbox over his shoulder and gave her a small wave, she found herself waving back, her hand trembling slightly, heart still racing, and as he walked down the driveway, a slight hesitation in his step as if he too felt the weight of their shared moment, she stood at the doorway, watching him leave, feeling the cool breeze brush against her skin, and in that quiet space, a rush of thoughts and emotions washed over her, memories of the afternoon replaying vividly in her mind. The curve of his smile, the careful way he had handled the tools, the quiet intensity in his eyes when he glanced at her, the unspoken words that hung in the air like a delicate melody, and she realized that something fundamental had shifted, that this simple encounter had awakened emotions she hadn't anticipated, feelings of longing, admiration, gentle attraction, and the strange, fluttering hope that life might allow them another chance, another shared moment, that somehow their paths would cross again. And as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the driveway, she felt a shiver of anticipation mixed with a tender ache in her chest, the quiet knowledge that this was only the beginning of something subtle, fragile, and deeply emotional, a story that had begun in the most ordinary of ways but had the potential to grow into something meaningful, innocent, yet emotionally stirring, and she knew that the memory of Daniel, of his careful hands, his shy smile, the way he had made her feel alive again, would linger long after he left, shaping her thoughts, coloring her emotions, and leaving her quietly, beautifully changed, filled with hope, curiosity, and a gentle longing for what might come next. And as she closed the door and leaned against it, letting out a slow breath she hadn't realized she was holding, she felt a soft, fluttering excitement, a tiny thrill that life, even in its quietest, most ordinary moments, had a way of surprising the heart, awakening emotions, and opening doors to connections that were tender, respectful, and unforgettable, leaving her standing there with a smile, a warm ache in her chest, and the undeniable knowledge that the afternoon's events had already left a mark on her soul, a mark that promised more laughter, more shared moments, and perhaps, in time, the delicate unfolding of a story that would be hers to experience, cherish, and hold. Close forever. The stepmother couldn't stop thinking about Daniel the day after he had fixed her car. Every time she moved around the house, her mind drifted to the way he had concentrated, the slight furrow of his brow, the careful movements of his hands, the shy, almost hesitant smile that had lingered in her memory, and even the sound of his voice replayed itself in her mind, soft and warm, making her feel unexpectedly alive and noticed. And she went about her morning routine, trying to focus on chores, but each time she picked up a dish or swept the floor, she found herself imagining him returning, imagining the brush of his fingers against hers, the shared laughter that had filled the quiet garage, and the gentle, unspoken connection that had formed, and the thought made her heart race with an unfamiliar, thrilling energy, a fluttering in her chest she hadn't felt in years, a combination of curiosity, admiration, and the quiet stirrings of a longing that was tender, respectful, and profoundly human, and she realized that it wasn't just attraction but something deeper, something that touched the part of her that craved connection, attention, and the feeling of being genuinely seen by another person. And she wondered if Daniel felt even a fraction of what she felt, if he remembered the way she had watched him, the way she had smiled at his small gestures, the way their hands had brushed ever so slightly as she had handed him water, the moment that had sparked a chain of thoughts she couldn't ignore. And the more she thought about him, the more the house seemed to take on a different quality, the walls brighter, the sunlight warmer, the air filled with a sense of quiet anticipation, as if the memory of him had brought a subtle energy into her world, making the ordinary extraordinary. And as she set the table for lunch, she felt herself imagining him walking through the door, the small toolbox in hand, a shy smile lighting up his face, and she could almost hear the soft sound of his voice, the gentle tone that had always seemed to reach past the surface and touch something tender in her. And the thought made her smile, a soft, involuntary curve of her lips, and she realized with a start that she was looking forward to seeing him again in a way that felt both exciting and comforting, a mix of longing and warmth that was gentle, safe, and deeply moving. And by mid-afternoon, the anticipation had become almost unbearable, and she busied herself with laundry and tidying, hoping that perhaps a knock at the door would bring him back. And as if the universe had heard her quiet wish, a soft, hesitant knock sounded, making her heart leap, and when she opened the door, there he was again, Daniel, holding a small toolbox, his eyes lighting up when he saw her, a shy, almost nervous smile forming on his lips, and she felt a rush of warmth as she invited him inside, feeling a thrill at the simplicity of the moment, the normalcy of it, and the subtle magic of being near him. And they set to work together, tightening bolts, adjusting wires, cleaning the small mess left behind by the stubborn engine, and she noticed everything about him. The way he leaned over the car with careful attention, the way his fingers moved with precision, the quiet intensity in his gaze when he looked at her, and she realized that these small, shared actions carried a depth of emotion she hadn't expected, that even mundane tasks could become intimate through laughter, shared glances, and the warmth of presence. And as they passed tools back and forth, their hands occasionally brushing, she felt a flutter, a thrill of nervous energy that was both exhilarating and comforting. A sign that their connection was growing in subtle, tender ways, and though no words were spoken about it, the atmosphere between them was rich with unspoken feelings, a quiet understanding, a gentle attraction that neither could deny, and the hours passed quickly, filled with small smiles, soft laughter, and a sense of companionship that was rare and precious. And she found herself lingering near him, watching him work, feeling a strange happiness in simply being near someone who had awakened emotions she hadn't felt in a long time. And when he laughed at a small mistake she made while handing him a tool, the sound was so genuine, so warm, that she felt her heart lift, a lightness spreading through her chest, a sense of joy she hadn't realized she had missed, and she found herself wanting to extend the moment, to let it last longer, to savor the quiet intimacy of sharing space, effort, and attention. And yet, as much as she wanted the afternoon to stretch indefinitely, reality intervened when her phone buzzed. A message from her stepson reminding Daniel of their plans, and she watched his expression flicker with regret, a brief shadow passing across his features as he glanced at her, eyes filled with something she couldn't quite name, a hesitation, a longing, a wish that they could linger just a little longer. And before she could speak, he carefully packed up his tools, his movements deliberate, slow, almost reluctant, and she felt a gentle ache as he prepared to leave, a mixture of disappointment and anticipation, knowing that this brief encounter had deepened her feelings, that it had opened a small door to emotions she wasn't ready to fully understand, yet felt compelled to explore. And as he waved goodbye, she waved back, her hand trembling slightly, her chest tight with unspoken emotion. And as she watched him walk down the driveway, she felt a rush of thoughts, memories of the afternoon replaying vividly, the careful attention he had shown, the way he had smiled at her, the subtle pauses, the quiet moments of shared laughter, and she realized that these memories were more than just pleasant thoughts. They were the beginnings of something emotionally significant, a tender connection that could grow, evolve, and bring joy, warmth, and excitement into her life. And she found herself imagining future encounters, imagining conversations, shared smiles, moments of laughter, even the simple act of him returning to help with something as mundane as a car, and each imagination filled her with a fluttering hope, a quiet thrill, a sense of possibility that was both gentle and exhilarating, and she understood that this attraction, this admiration, this subtle longing was different from anything she had felt before, rooted in respect, care, and genuine connection rather than fleeting desire. And the more she thought about it, the more she realized that she wanted to nurture it, to allow herself to feel it fully, to embrace the unexpected joy it brought into her life. And over the next few hours, as she tidied the garage and prepared tea, she felt a sense of anticipation, a soft, gentle excitement at the idea that Daniel might return, that their interactions could continue, and that these small moments could evolve into a meaningful bond, a relationship built on shared respect, gentle affection, and the thrill of emotional closeness. And as the evening sun cast long shadows across the room, she found herself standing by the window, gazing at the driveway, heart full of expectation, thoughts swirling with memories, smiles, and laughter, realizing that life had subtly shifted, that her ordinary days had been infused with new energy, warmth, and hope, and that even the smallest actions, a repaired car, a shared laugh, a brief touch, could carry immense emotional weight, could awaken the heart, could stir the soul, and she felt a quiet gratitude, a deep appreciation for the presence of Daniel, for the way he had made her feel alive, noticed, and cherished in ways she hadn't expected. And she knew, with a soft, thrilling certainty, that their story was only beginning, that the connection between them was delicate, tender, and full of promise. And as night fell and the stars began to appear, she closed the curtains but held the memory of his smile, his laughter, the gentle way he had looked at her, in her heart, feeling a gentle flutter of excitement for the future, for the next moment, for the next encounter, knowing that this unexpected bond, born from a simple act of kindness and shared effort, had opened a door to emotions that were both thrilling and comforting, leaving her hopeful, touched, and quietly, profoundly moved by the possibilities that lay ahead. A story unfolding slowly, beautifully, and entirely new, promising moments of connection, joy, and heartfelt emotion she would carry with her long after the day ended. A few days had passed since Daniel's last visit, and the stepmother found herself thinking about him constantly, replaying the memories of their time together in her mind. The way he had smiled shyly, the careful way he had worked on the car, the small, almost imperceptible touches that had sent unexpected warmth through her chest. And though she tried to focus on her daily routine, her thoughts kept drifting toward him, imagining the sound of his voice, the warmth in his eyes, and the gentle way he had made her feel alive again, noticed and appreciated. And as she went about her chores, preparing the house for the evening, she was startled by a soft knock at the door, the kind of knock that carried a tentative energy, hesitant yet hopeful, and her heart skipped as she hurried to open it, only to discover a small envelope resting neatly on the doormat, addressed to her in Daniel's unmistakable handwriting, and she bent down to pick it up, feeling a rush of anticipation, curiosity, and a fluttering nervous excitement, her fingers trembling slightly as she opened it. And inside was a short note, written simply but with thoughtfulness and care, expressing gratitude for letting him help with the car, recalling the laughter they had shared, the quiet moments of connection, and the ease with which they had communicated without words. And alongside the note was a tiny keychain, shaped like an engine, a small, meaningful token that made her smile, cheeks warming, heart beating faster, as she held it in her hand, turning it over slowly, thinking about the thought and effort behind such a gesture. And she felt a swell of emotion, a gentle rush of happiness, hope, and longing that seemed to fill the room. And as she stood there, she replayed all the memories of their interactions, the shy smiles, the brief touches, the careful attention he had shown not just to the car but to her, the way he had acknowledged her presence in a way that felt both respectful and emotionally stirring, and she realized that these small, simple gestures carried more weight than she had expected, that the quiet connection they had formed was deeply meaningful, tender, and subtly powerful, and she felt her chest tighten slightly, a soft ache of longing mixed with excitement, a desire to see him again, to share more moments, to explore the emotional bond that had quietly begun between them. And over the next few hours, she moved around the house with the keychain and note in her hand, feeling a warmth in her heart that she hadn't felt in a long time, imagining the next time they might meet, the next conversation, the laughter, the shared quiet moments, and the possibility of this connection growing into something even more meaningful. And she found herself replaying every detail, from the way he had concentrated on the engine, the subtle tension when their hands brushed, to the soft laughter that had filled the garage, and each memory seemed to make her chest flutter, her mind fill with anticipation, and her heart expand with hope. And she realized that this connection, though innocent, was deeply moving, a gentle awakening of emotions she had thought were long buried, and she felt grateful for the simplicity, sincerity, and thoughtfulness of it, for the way it had reminded her that even small gestures could hold immense emotional weight, and that meaningful connections could appear in unexpected places, in ordinary moments, and through acts of care, attention, and presence. And as the evening sun cast a soft glow across the kitchen, she sat down at the table, holding the note and keychain, imagining Daniel walking through the door, toolbox in hand, with that shy, warm smile she had come to adore, imagining the soft hum of conversation, the small shared laughter, the gentle energy that seemed to fill the room whenever he was near. And she felt a thrill, a quiet excitement at the thought that these moments could happen again, that life could provide more opportunities for connection, for joy, for tender emotional closeness. And she reflected on how different it felt to anticipate simple interactions with someone who had awakened her heart in such a gentle, respectful way. And she realized that it wasn't just admiration or fleeting attraction, but a meaningful emotional bond, one built on kindness, attentiveness, subtle communication, and shared experiences. and she thought about the future with a sense of hope and quiet anticipation, imagining the gradual unfolding of this connection, the deepening of trust, the laughter, the shared stories, the moments of understanding, without words, and the small gestures that carried profound meaning, and she felt herself smiling softly, cheeks warm, heart racing, because she knew that these feelings were real, that the bond between her and Daniel was growing in its own delicate, beautiful way, and she savored the emotional richness, the gentle thrill of longing, the quiet joy that came from knowing that someone cared for her, had thought of her, and had taken the time to leave a piece of himself behind in the form of a note and keychain. And as night fell and the first stars appeared in the sky, she placed the keychain on the table, imagining it as a symbol of possibility, of the subtle beginnings of something tender, emotionally fulfilling, and profoundly moving, a connection that didn't need grand declarations or dramatic gestures to be powerful. And she realized that sometimes the simplest things, a smile, a laugh, a careful touch, a note left behind, could awaken the heart in ways that words alone never could, and she felt a swell of gratitude, excitement, and longing, a mixture of emotions that filled her completely, and as she stood by the window, gazing at the quiet street outside, she imagined Daniel returning, imagined the continuation of their gentle story, and she knew that this was only the beginning, that life had provided a small, unexpected spark, and that this spark had the potential to grow into something deeply meaningful, emotionally rich, and beautifully tender. A story unfolding in small, quiet moments that left her touched, inspired, and filled with anticipation for the future. And as she closed the curtains and prepared for bed, she held the note and keychain close to her heart, feeling the warmth, the hope, and the gentle thrill of connection, knowing that even in the simplest gestures, life had a way of surprising the heart, awakening emotions, and planting seeds for a story that was hers to experience, cherish, and nurture. A story of quiet affection, innocent longing, emotional intimacy, and the delicate, powerful beginnings of something unforgettable. A story that promised more laughter, more shared moments, and more opportunities for tenderness, warmth, and hope, leaving her heart full, her spirit light, and her mind buzzing with the thrill of what was to come. A story unfolding slowly, beautifully, and entirely new, quietly but profoundly changing her world with every thought, every memory, every gentle emotion, every fluttering hope for the next chapter in a bond that was tender, respectful, emotionally rich, and unforgettable.